If you live in BC, own real estate in BC, or are thinking about owning real estate in British Columbia, then there's no doubt that this information is going to have a massive impact on the potential decisions that you make when it comes to buying or selling real estate. In fact, there are literally billions of dollars on the line with the British Columbia's new announcements as far as what is about to happen to flippers and first-time buyers, and so much more. Let's get into it. Well, running a massive deficit can get you into all types of trouble if you run a private business, and in most cases a public business, but if you run the government, it's a normal affair these days. And while we're not here to necessarily judge or break down why they did it, let's talk about exactly what happened in regards to the new rules for anyone buying real estate in British Columbia moving forward in 2024. If you don't already know, my name is Alex McFadyen, and I'm a mortgage professional, own a company, and focused on real estate investing and helping our clients with mortgage financing. If you haven't done so already, hit that link, the subscribe button, and we'll see you in the next video. But for today, we're going to talk about specifically what the BC NDP did and the big announcements that they had that are going to impact your potential wallet and bottom line. Now, there were a lot of different announcements that were brought out for 2024. The biggest and most notable ones are in fact two announcements. The first one, the new quote-unquote anti-flipping laws. Now, these anti-flipping laws have been talked about for the better part of the last couple of months, and there have been a lot of suggestions that we'd see a number of changes when it comes to how homes are bought or sold and what types of taxes might be brought on those properties. Well, we just recently found out exactly how the government is going to be looking at flipping, and there are some massive implications. So let's get right into it. We are looking at a new 2-year anti-flipping law in BC. That's right, you heard it. 2 years. Well, that's 4, but 2 years that you'll be looking at anti-flipping laws in British Columbia. Now, I don't know about you, but if it took you 2 years to flip a home, I feel like you'd be a really slow flipper and you'd probably end up losing money and or just not being very good at what you're trying to do here. So what actually is going on here? Well, ultimately speaking, the government is basically saying we are going to go as far as we can to push back as much as we can and essentially tax you as much as we can if you buy and sell a home within a 24-month time frame. You heard it right. Now, a few thoughts or considerations will come after this, but let's break down the key details. So, if you buy a home and then you sell that home within 1 year of purchasing it, after January 1st, 2025, you will be taxed at 20% of the increase in value. In addition to that, if you sell it between 12 to 24 months after that point, you will be paying based on what's called a sliding scale. So at the end of the first year, you'll pay 100% of the tax, and by the end of the second year, it goes down to 0 of the tax. So you're going to be taxed no matter what if you sell your property within that 2-year time frame. These are some key pieces of information to know because this is a substantial additional cost, and my mind first and foremost goes to who will be impacted and who won't be impacted. Now, there are some exemptions that do apply, and those exemptions include life circumstance such as divorce, death, separation, disability, loss of work, and or personal safety or insolvency. A couple of thoughts and questions on that. Who's making the decision as to whether or not your personal life circumstance or job change is worth making the move or selling, and what kind of proof will you have to provide? There haven't been any specific answers there, and that has me a little bit wondering, and I've talked to a few people already who have some cause for concern about providing that personal and private information to the government itself. That being said, moving forward, where this will probably have a massive impact will be, and likely very intended, those who purchase pre-sale properties with the intention on not keeping them. The pre-sale property quote-unquote speculators have been under the government's eye and nose for the better part of the last couple of years and blamed in many situations for increasing property values, and now they are right in the crosshairs, and it's very likely that they will be the most high impacted group of people as it pertains to these taxes. So how this exactly would work for those folks is in many situations, people look to sell properties right after they close without either living in them or having someone rent them, and use the profits to leverage to purchase something else or more real estate or whatever they decide to do. In many situations, these people are already causing an increase to valuations and have been obviously under the gun or under the fire, if you will, for the past couple of years for increasing new build pricing for condos. Now, those are the primary target audience that we think will be affected, and this likely will impact, in fact, it almost guaranteed will impact those who bought pre-sale properties even 1, 2, 3, or 4 years ago who are coming up to purchase their property this year or in the near future. That's a massive warning to anyone purchasing a pre-sale. Either A, be prepared to close on it, or B, be prepared to pay the tax tax and make sure that you can actually cover the tax and or hold that property for at least 2 years before you decide to sell it. So that is the number one consideration from this BC housing budget, and I think will have some impact on the market. But there are some major concerns to think about here in this particular type of tax. Well, typically speaking, in my experience, it's been extremely rare that I would find someone selling their property within 2 years without good reason. And the reasons aren't necessarily defined specifically by the ones that we mentioned earlier, such as death or divorce. It could be that the property just doesn't suit them anymore. It could be that they bought it, then they had a kid and they decided to move up. Is that acceptable? It could be in a situation where they had a life change that was outside of this normal occurrence and they decided to make the move to a different piece of real estate. Or they could have just changed their mind on the neighborhood and said, this isn't the right place for me to be. I want to be somewhere else. And so to assume that every person who is purchasing who saw it within 2 years is doing so to flip or make money, I think is a very poor assumption, because in my opinion, it's just been a very rare occurrence where someone has planned this out. I believe that a 1-year timeline would have made more sense, but I'd also be curious to know on more transparency around what would be accepted. My other fear is that many people won't actually look into these guidelines, or it'll be too challenging to figure out how to actually get these exemptions. So you'll see people who will stay in these properties even though they shouldn't, because of the personal safety or because of some other reason, and it will restrict supply. So another challenge associated with another tax, which is restricting supply. At the end of the day, taxes aren't the solution for these issues. And while we do want to see less people speculating on the marketplace, I think a little bit more thought could have gone into who, how, and the timeline associated with this. Let's get on to number 2. The second big piece of news here, which we slightly teased in the beginning, is for first-time homebuyers. Now, thankfully, this is more on the positive side of things, and although it should have happened years ago, it's good that it's happening today. In BC, if you didn't already know, you have to pay a property transfer tax on any eligible properties, which is typically a freehold strata, and many other property types, although there are some exemptions. It's 1% of the first $200,000 and 2% on the amount above that up to $3 million, at which point there's an additional 2% above that amount. Well, up until recently, you would have to pay, as a first-time buyer, transfer tax on anything above $500,000 and all of the transfer tax on anything above $525,000. Well, the news today is they've actually increased the limit of the purchase price. So what they've done is they've increased the purchase price limit to up to $835,000 for a full exemption on the first $500,000. That's a mouthful. So let's explain exactly how that works and what it means. So currently, if you were to purchase a property today at $835,000, first-time or second-time buyer, you would end up paying $14,700 worth of property transfer tax. Well, after April 1st of 2024, so if you're watching this video, you would not have to pay the $8,000 on the first $500,000. That is a massive win for first-time buyers, and I think ultimately what this does is it increases the valuation of properties in that price band, but it does provide some tax relief and help people get into the market because they need less money for closing and they can use more towards their down payment, which is a good sign for people getting into the marketplace today. There is a small little note to say that there is an exception for 835 to 860 where you can actually get a small rebate, which is again on a sliding scale. You get 100% rebate at 835, followed all the way to 0% at $860,000. So we do believe that this is a good move for the BC government, thankfully eliminating a tax for those that want to get in, need to get into the marketplace. A couple of questions: how did they land on $835,000, and why not just make it up to $1 million, and or why the sliding scale for this small period of time? Nonetheless, we're going to applaud a good move. Finally, the new home buying property transfer tax exemption, which is for all new purchases of brand newly developed properties, has been increased up to $1.1 million. And this is for anyone purchasing a new development property to own or occupy, meaning you live in the property. Doesn't matter if you're a first-time homebuyer or not, you are now exempt from property transfer tax up to 1.1, which was previously up to $750,000. Again, there is a sliding scale above that, but the good news with this particular one is ultimately it is a better price range for the new development properties because we see most of them in that $1 million price point. And although we wish the first-time homebuyer was closer to this, it is a nice step in the right direction. One thing to keep in mind is you still have to pay GST on all brand new pieces of real estate. So while there is this exemption on these types of properties, there is no exemption on GST at that price point. So it is something to keep in mind. So in summary, a lot of big news, and there were some other announcements that came out when it came to the different types of things that are going to be coming out that are new for British Columbia purchasers of real estate. But ultimately, going through the list from the flipping tax, which is a 2-year timeline, to the first-time buyer and the new development exemption timelines, we believe that all in all, the flipping tax was an overstep and a timeline which is a little bit too long, but likely won't have a major real impact on most of the marketplace, except for the crowd that is flipping those pre-sale properties. Whereas those people who are purchasing properties as a first-time buyer after April 1st are very happy, and those who just bought this year might be a little bit bummed out because they missed out on that exemption, but they'll be happy to note that property values are rising anyways. All in all, again, good news. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, click, subscribe, and follow. We'll see you on the next one.